Good afternoon. Getting right down to business here. We're doing it live and doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. Right after Guy Benson now at 3 o'clock here in 790 KBC. And we do all this just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money. Live on the air, 790 KBC. Streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com. And the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, KBC.com, Apple, iTunes, YouTube, all of your favorite podcast platforms. We'll be focusing, of course, on the Southern California firestorm aftermath this afternoon and the highest possible warnings issued right now as far as weather is concerned. Right now, with the current wind situation being watched very, very closely. In fact, the most serious red flag fire weather warning has been issued by the National Weather Service and now in effect for tonight and into tomorrow for parts of Los Angeles and Ventura County starting before dawn tomorrow. The continuing threat in the area, weary, of course, after nearly a week of firestorms. Our heart goes out to all of those who've lost their homes and all of our neighbors and businesses here in this area. Coming up, we'll go straight to the fire lines with Los Angeles County Fire Specialist and Public Information Officer Craig Little. The LA County DA Nathan Hochman has put out a strong warning to price gougers and looters in the current firestorm emergency. I'll discuss what's happening on the law enforcement front tonight with the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former LA City Council member and former LAPD sergeant and current LAPD Reserve officer. Of course, we've been hearing from the various business groups. Maria Salinas from the LA Chamber of Commerce has a long list of resources available on their website. LA BizFed, the Los Angeles Business Federation, San Gabriel Valley Economic Partnership, and the list goes on. The stock market, meanwhile, moving sharply lower today in reaction to a better-than-expected jobs report that happened on Friday. Stocks ending mostly higher today, with the S&P 500 shaking off the earlier losses to post the biggest intraday comeback in 4 months. The S&P 500 did end up higher today with a gain of 9 points. The Dow Jones Industrial Average came in for a closing gain of 359 points today, settling at 42,297. The NASDAQ pulling back 73.5 points at 19,088. Bitcoin's been all over the place today, and right now hovering at around 94,000 or so. We'll be taking a closer look at all of this coming up here shortly. Looks like energy and materials sectors saw gains of about 2% to lead the way higher for the S&P 500. We did see the price of oil move higher today, settling the highest we've seen in about 5 months, on expectations that the latest sanctions on Russian oil will lead to tighter global supplies. The decision here in the U.S. unlikely to trigger a sharp drop in Russian exports, but the additional sanctions risk could create concern for potential buyers, likely forcing Russia to sell its crude at a steeper discount relative to other international benchmarks in order to minimize export losses, according to one analyst today, speaking to MarketWatch. As far as the yield on the 10-year note, it has spiked to close to 5% today, 4.79%. We're keeping an eye on that. Looks like the dollar has firmed once again overseas, and gold continues on a roll right now at $2,686 an ounce, silver at $30.38 an ounce. Joining us live now, money manager Ken Winans, also a market historian, author of numerous books, including Investment Atlas 1 and 2, and now Investment Atlas 3, Creating Wealth Using Historical Trends. He's also a Forbes magazine contributor. Be sure to check out his latest article. He also has his crypto credentials, and most importantly, he's host of Winning with Winans, heard every Monday night at 6 p.m. right here on your favorite station, 790 KBC. Ken Winans, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Hello, Frank. And listen, real quick, to our audience members who are struggling with the fire, my true best to all of you. I know when I was at church this weekend, we said a group prayer for everybody. I know it's not a lot of comfort right now, but there are a lot of people worried about you across the country, and just we wish the best.
Certainly, and I would echo that, Ken. Thank you very much for that. Ken Winans on the air live with us, and the economic impact of all of this being assessed. I know you, in your Investment Atlas 3, you're a market historian. You do spend quite a bit of pages there on disasters and the aftermath and the potential impact on the economy. This time around, we have the right person here on the line. Obviously, a lot of focus of attention right now on disaster impact here, the potential impact on the economy, insurance companies, and so forth. Give us your impressions here of what's happened and the potential impact here on the economy and indeed the markets.
Well, in Investment Atlas, which both 1, 2, and 3, I covered, natural disasters going back to the 1800s. And what I can tell you, and although it's not in any way, shape, or form meant to be callous about this, because we know the human toll is huge and individually it affects people, but nationwide we find that the American economy is very resilient and bounces back. Go look at certainly the Hurricane Andrew, Hurricane Katrina, certainly the tornado storms that we saw over the last certainly the last 20 years. All of it, there's some initial volatility, and I do think the later sell-offs last week, although certainly there was a lot of reports about Friday with the job market, but I think it was a direct response to what was going on in LA. But what I would say is this: I wrote a Forbes article in October last year talking about California's issues, and I specifically brought up that I felt California municipal bonds were overpriced based on a lot of the economic issues within the entire state. I think that this will be the straw that breaks California's back from the standpoint that California just doesn't have the extra reserves. So if you're talking about an area that I would be worried about, if you're a California municipal bondholder, I think you have to factor this in, not just now, but going over the next 12 to 18 months. Because again, it's just the costs are almost incalculable of what it's going to cost the state to fix this. But Frank, again, looking at what's going on in the market right now, I do find it interesting that when we do have disasters like this, there does tend to be a shift in groups. And one of the groups that was by far the worst performing last year has really shown the strength well this year. And it's one of the big reasons the Dow was so much stronger than the S&P 500 today, not only in the way it's calculated, but in its contents, and it is healthcare. When you look at the Dow components, Merck, Johnson & Johnson, Amgen, United Healthcare, they were all the key leaders today in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And I think that you also have I think there is still serious profit taking happening in the tech area. I think there are some concerns about earnings season, which is really going to start the tail end of this week going into next week. And obviously next week is also a holiday week. There's going to be a lot of concerns about good, bad, and ugly in the earnings picture. But there's certainly a shift and a rotation within the groups that we can see happening every day.
We'll be taking a closer look at the insurance stocks here coming up shortly, but are some of these companies going to go belly up given the magnitude of the losses sustained here in the Los Angeles area?
Well, that is one of the what ifs. I mean, I do follow several companies in the insurance area: Aflac, Ion, Old Republic, Progressive, and might not be directly tied to Los Angeles real estate. But one of the things that's very interesting is that those four companies really, although they've had a bad month, Frank, they're actually up today. So I would say that you're going to have to, and again, we'll look at the earnings when they come out in a couple of weeks, because the companies that have the greatest hits tied to that will certainly be suffering the greatest hits in their stock price going forward. But I think you want to be very careful on just saying an industry group overall is going to be hit by this. Look at what the banks are going to have to deal with mortgages. I think it will be interesting to see what banks have to do in reserve write-ups on that. So there's just going to be, certainly business insurance. That's a whole another area too. But we haven't tallied up, unfortunately, the butcher's bill yet on this thing, and we probably won't for quite a while.
Now they're live with money manager Ken WINANS, host of Winning with WINANS here at 6 p.m. on 790 KABC. Also, we'll, of course, be watching that sector very, very closely. Looks like some of the big banks have already announced mortgage forbearance programs for those who've lost their homes in the incinerated areas of Pacific Palisades, in the Eaton Fire in the San Gabriel Valley, and the other major fire areas. It's still a nervous time, and the emergency is not over. It looks like the calm before the storm here at the moment. It's a beautiful evening, pretty much a smoke-free evening that we see here from our vantage point here in the Culver City area. But the embers, the fear is that if the winds pick up, which is expected by tomorrow morning and into all the way later in the week, that fires could easily flare up in the tinder dry conditions out there. So we're all nervously watching what's happening here at the moment. You mentioned healthcare. Looks like there were some exceptions on Moderna, the drug name, which became famous during the pandemic, taking a big hit today, down 17%. So what's going on? Maybe you can tell us more about what happened in the healthcare sector and also in the pharmaceutical space here today.
I think it's a couple of things. Number one, there's certainly everybody in my industry knows, although we like to think we have inflation contained, we don't. From the standpoint, inflation is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. It is logical to assume that healthcare has always been one of those inflation-resistant areas. I also think, too, there's been a lot of discussion about what the new administration is going to come up with healthcare, and I think that they are finding that, again, the idea of deregulation, reallocating resources to can best produce drugs, and for many people who might not remember, during the President Trump's first term, they fast-tracked a lot of the drug companies to help with the COVID pandemic. So I think there's a sense that this administration might actually be more favorable towards the healthcare industry than the previous. So I think that's one. Number two, Frank, again, going back to the insurance thing, again, I think anything that is an inflation-resistant industry, you can find that there might be, especially when there's pullbacks in those groups, that people do factor in that this is a safer bet if you're going to go into an area, certainly like what we're going into right now. But, one thing, and age-old what happens when you have disasters, it is interesting to look that the areas that, I'm suddenly looking at a lot of the raw material type companies, especially ones tied to anything with rebuilding, especially with what happened after Katrina, certainly with what we saw happening in Florida this year or last year with the hurricanes. You need a lot of wood. You need to get in there and start rebuilding as soon as possible. You need a lot of cement. You need a lot of copper. You need a lot of building construction materials and steel. And you're finding that those stocks very clearly, there's speculation that there's going to be increased demand within those groups. And that was loud and clear today. One name in particular, Boise Cascade, had a very, very strong day.
You raise an important point. A lot of the homes here in Southern California that were destroyed were indeed made out of wood, because wood bends when the earth shakes here. We're an earthquake country, and I remember, of course, the Northridge earthquake in 1994, and the building that I was in, it looked like it was made out of cardboard. So a lot of wood construction here, and that's how it is. And unfortunately, tinderbox conditions when you have a severe firestorm, as we saw in this catastrophic situation here, where you have blowtorch conditions of fire fueled by the super high winds we saw. And we hope and pray that this will not happen again in the coming days with the very ominous wind predictions that we're getting from the National Weather Service here. We're on there live with Money Manager Ken Winans, and certainly the cryptos were in focus today as well, Ken, as we kicked off the new week. Bitcoin all over the place here, right now hovering at around 94,000. What are your thoughts here on the cryptos here at the moment?
I think there's some profit taking and there's reallocating portfolios within the crypto space. And I know there's still a lot of hope on the new coins that are coming out that we expect during the year. And also there's just still cross current of word about regulatory issues and where regulation will be moving in certain directions. Ironically, I had a lot of people asking me really over the last week or so about how they could hedge their crypto portfolios. And there certainly are ETFs out there. You don't have to do it within your wallets. You can do it certainly within the ETF space, that there are inverses out there. So there is, although they're believers in certainly what's going on in the crypto space, but there is a belief about taking some money off the table or at least hedging your risk. I'm not worried about this personally. I see this as a pullback in an otherwise uptrend market. I still see an awful lot of positives there. In other words, Frank, in my line of work, what we would call, you want to look at trying to buy the dip, not sell the rally. I've been asked quite a bit, by the way, and some of our audience members from both of our shows have asked, when do I become a bear? What would it take? I think seeing how the rest of January plays out, especially with earnings. We know how the Federal Reserve feels. We certainly know with the report that came out last week. We know there's a change in administration, but the earnings piece is going to be critical to determining the strength and which groups are going to lead going forward for the remainder of 2025. And so we'll just have to wait and see. I'm officially still believing it's buy the dip, but it's what to buy. And that's a tough one to do right now when you have, investors are as nervous as cats, so to speak, and they just don't want to step in and get hit within the next week because of a bad earnings report. So, but I think at the meantime, you just have to wait and see how it plays out.
Just a week away from the inauguration of President-elect Trump coming up here on January 20th, which is also a federal holiday this year, MLK Day, a week from today, next Monday. And some write-ups today about Janet Yellen, the current Treasury Secretary, and allegations that this administration is setting up the new administration for a debt crisis. How do you expect the new administration to hit the ground running next week, and the big issues that it'll be facing?
Well, the debt is going to be with us for a long time. We can all argue on any side of the aisle, how did we get here? Iraq, Afghanistan was expensive. The 2008-2009 bailout was expensive. COVID relief was expensive. And it certainly is what triggered the inflation we have. But the debt is the debt. And I do think that the new Treasury Secretary is going to have to coordinate very closely with the Fed, because the Federal Reserve, not to get into the weeds on this, but the Federal Reserve absorbed an awful lot of that debt. And they're going to have to begin to shrink those holdings down. So you got to figure out ways to push that into the market. The good news, and it continues to be good news, is the dollar is very strong around the world. It's holding itself as the base mark currency. And with that, there might be more buyers of U.S. government debt because of that as we try to bleed off some of our holdings. So those are positives from that standpoint. But Frank, it is true that administrations handing off things, there's always a bit of contentiousness on how things are handled. But I think that Secretary Yellen's doing the best she can with what she's trying to tie off, so to speak. Excellent point
on the dollar, which remains firm against the euro. In fact, at 102 versus the euro, we're at 157 against the Japanese yen, and at 122 versus the British pound sterling. And all this, gold continues to shine up again today, just shy of 2,700. Silver is hovering above $30 an ounce. What about good old analog gold here? We talked about digital gold, the cryptos. What about gold here?
Seasonally, gold and silver both have very good runs through the first 2 months of any year. And I'm talking about seasonality. Some of it's geopolitical. Some of it has to do with what goes on in India. Certainly, there's central banks around the world that have talked about buying and stockpiling more gold. But it also just has to do with, hey, I'm living in Las Vegas. I can tell you that people were buying a lot of jewelry. When you went by the jewelry stores in the very high-end districts of Vegas, they were buying stuff like mad, especially the tourists coming to town. So I think the good old-fashioned supply and demand is driving that up to a point. I do think, and it's just important to remember, that when you have inflation in a system, you expect gold and silver and other metals, and certainly you can argue maybe to a point with crypto, even though crypto is more of a tech play with NASDAQ, you can make the case that people are still putting it in their portfolios. And there are a lot of nervous people out there, and they are getting concerned about things, and they're adding more of it there. I certainly have no problem with people adding things such as the gold ETF or the silver ETF into their portfolios. It's not a bad play for the remainder of this quarter.
All right, and before I let you off the hook, any other specific places where you are putting money now and/or taking it off the table?
Well, I'll tell you, I would certainly take a good hard look at some of these commodity plays like Boise Cascade, symbol BCC, and it actually has a pretty nice dividend. Also, believe it or not, Frank, I don't think you ever hear me talk about coal, but I believe it or not, the coal stocks had a good day today. A couple in particular that I would look at very closely. There's one called Warrior Met Coal, coal symbol HCC. Just take a good look at it. It's actually having a really good run, and it was one of the top performers today. And people are asking me about oil. Take a look at Marathon, which is a symbol MPC. It also was on the very strong up list today. So I think you have to look at commodities. And then certainly, one last thing, healthcare. If you're not sure about healthcare, but you want to get your foot a little wet in the area, take a good look at the XLV ETF. That is the healthcare sector spider. That might be a good place to stick a little money if you like healthcare.
Ken, thank you very much for taking the call, and thank you for your well wishes for all of us here in Southern California in the current fire emergency. We do appreciate it, and of course, look forward to speaking with you again soon, including tonight on Winning with Winans at 6 p.m. right here on 790 KABC. Ken Winans, money manager with Winans Investments at winansinvestments.com, author of numerous books, including Investment Atlas 1 and 2. Investment Atlas 3 is out now as well, creating wealth using historical trends. He's also a Forbes magazine contributor and has his crypto credentials, as you heard. Ken Winans, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
My pleasure, Frank. Take care.
Thank you very much. And out to the freeways now on 790 KBC. Frank Mottek here. Did you know that for more than 10,000 years, gold has been the greatest store of value and considered a safe haven asset to preserve your wealth? Now, with the U.S. debt at more than $36 trillion and climbing, the possible recession on the horizon, and the development of the digital dollar, central bank digital currency, it's more critical now than ever before to safeguard your assets like your cash savings and retirement accounts with physical gold. Opening a gold IRA is one of the best ways to secure your wealth and create a stable financial future. Stop worrying about your retirement and the markets and cash savings in the bank. Feel confident, prepared, and in control with physical gold and silver. Give Joe Morgan a call now at 1-800-753-8534. Mention Frank Mottek, and you can get $1,000 worth of silver with a qualifying purchase. Call now, 1-800-753-8534, or visit UnitedGoldGroup.com. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. We'll go right to the fire lines coming up here in the next half hour. We'll be speaking live to one of the top people of the L.A. County Fire Department, as well as the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former L.A. City Council member and former LAPD sergeant, still out there serving as an LAPD reserve officer. Following Friday's big losses, we did see a bit of a rebound today for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, closing up 359 points, settling at 42,297, the biggest intraday comeback since last September, it looks like. The S&P 500 moving up 9 at 5,836, and the NASDAQ sliding 73.5 points to 19,088. We see NVIDIA, the magnificent one, among the casualties of the day. Despite that, the Dow moved higher. NVIDIA is part of the Dow Jones Industrial Average now. NVIDIA stock down nearly $3 today, back to $133 and change. Moderna, among the casualties of the day, down 17%. The VIX index, the volatility index, the Wall Street so-called fear index, pulling back today by 2%. Gold on the rise of nearly $8 at $2,686.20 an ounce, up 31% over the past year, by the way. Silver up 7 cents at $30.38 an ounce. The yield in the 10-year note, which impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates out there, moving higher to 4.79%. And now the latest news here in 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Turning now to the firestorms. Looks like it's the calm before the next possible firestorm. In fact, the most serious red flag fire weather warning has now been issued by the National Weather Service for parts of L.A. and Ventura counties, starting before dawn tomorrow and going into Wednesday. Still a very nervous time here, although most of the sky from our vantage point is clear at the moment. The fires apparently have laid down, and if the winds pick up, they're expected to flare up again. Business groups, including the L.A. Area Chamber of Commerce, L.A. BizFed, LAEDC, United Chambers of Commerce in the Valley, San Gabriel Valley Economic Partnership, the Red Cross, homeless organizations, including the Union Rescue Mission in downtown Los Angeles, have organized relief efforts in the current firestorm disaster in Pacific Palisades, the Eaton Fire in the Altadena area, as well as the other areas hit by the firestorms. Joining us live now, L.A. County Firefighter Specialist and Public Information Officer Craig Little. Thank you very much for taking the call, and give us an update on what's happening out there right now.
Well, currently we have on the Palisades fire 23,713 acres burned, and it's at 14% contained. We have about over 5,100 personnel with 540 fire engines, 115 crews, 44 helicopters. We have 66 bulldozers and about 60 water tenders assigned to this fire.
God bless them all. And the Eaton Fire, I know you're following developments there as well.
Eaton Fire, I don't have as I'm on the Palisades Fire, but I have just a couple of numbers for you for the Eaton Fire. Right now we are at 14,117 acres with about 33% containment, and the status is still active right now.
What is the situation out there across the board? It's been a severe clear day today and yesterday. What's lurking under the surface? Is the fear here now that the fire is laid down in most places, and the wind could pick up tonight and continue this firestorm?
Yeah, we're definitely concerned with the wind picking up tonight and tomorrow. Conditions are definitely going to escalate as far as way worse than they are today. That's what we're really concerned with at this point. We are going into a red flag warning for that, which red flag warning essentially means winds over 25 miles an hour and humidity under 15%. along with the dry fuel that we have. It's just not a good recipe for a good day tomorrow.
Have you been bombing this thing out with water drops from the air today? What has been the strategy today?
Yeah, we have been staging a vigorous air attack as far as that goes. As far as tomorrow is concerned, depending on the winds, that may prevent us from flying our aircraft. Generally not only because it's unsafe possibly if the winds are too high for helicopters or fixed-wing aircraft to fly, but also as far as water dropping capability. When we have winds above 30 to 40 miles an hour, it makes it very difficult for the water to land on their intended targets.
Describe what's happening there in the Palisades now. Obviously, tremendous devastation. It's just the unthinkable has happened there with more than 5,300 structures burned. I believe you mentioned there in the Palisades alone, just incinerated there. Where is the fire now, and where is it going?
Well, currently the numbers that we have right now are we have 204 structures damaged. As far as structures destroyed, we have about 1,280, and the structures that are still threatened, we're looking at about 12,250. Wow. So that's kind of devastating on any level that you look at. Again, this is an anomaly as far as the weather and the devastation that's taking place right now.
What's the situation in Topanga Canyon?
Topanga Canyon, I don't have the exact numbers on that. It's pretty much, that's all thrown in with the Palisades fire, but, I haven't separated that as far as Topanga Canyon is concerned.
What's considered the front line of the firefight at this time in the Palisades area?
I'm sorry, one more time.
What's considered the front line in the Palisades fire? It did get into Brentwood over the weekend in the Mandeville Canyon area, right? What's considered the front line of the firefight? Yeah,
there's no real front line. It's so dynamic around here. We can't pinpoint it and say that this particular area happens to be the front line. It is so dynamic as of right now, and will continue to be so as far as tomorrow.
Any evacuation orders in place at the moment? What areas are considered most vulnerable overnight?
The areas that we are still looking in are the Palos Verdes. Everything is moving closer to the Calabasas area, in many different areas around them, stretching further into the valley areas.
Of course, Encino, Tarzana also threatened over the weekend. What's the situation there?
Encino and Threatened, they are still in that threatened mode. There has been no evacuation orders in place for those areas as of right now.
What's your best advice for the public listening to this conversation here now, seeing the highest possible red flag warning in place as we get into this evening and into tomorrow morning?
I would advise any residents that if you are receiving an evacuation order, please heed that. Please get ready and go. And if you're able to go before it gets to a point where it's an order, that would probably be the best. We don't want to have any of our roadways blocking firefighting personnel from getting to where they need to be because people are evacuating too late. That would be my best situation on that.
All right, you got the National Guard now in the fight, military assets also involved here. You guys have everything
Correct.
You need to fight this thing? You have everything you need?
We have California National Guard. We have about 2,500 personnel on the fire right now. Actually, the Cal Guard helicopters are dropping water on the fire as well. We also have 24,000 people that have registered for FEMA aid, according to the White House. And there is still a curfew in place from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the evacuated areas.
Any other information you'd like to get out at this time before we let you off the line?
Sure. Any people that are affected by these fires, they can visit the website ca.gov/LA fires, and you'll be able to access resources and information, including how to apply for federal assistance. We would just strongly urge people to heed any kind of a warning of evacuation and not be a part of the problem, be a part of the solution.
All of us are with you, and Godspeed tonight in this ongoing emergency. That is the Public Information Officer and Firefighter Specialist for the Los Angeles County Fire Department, Craig Little. Thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Not a problem. Thank you very much.
Godspeed to all of you, and thank you very much for joining us here. And out to the freeways we go now on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC, continuing the coverage of the firestorms here in Southern California. Looks like it's the calm before the next storm here at the moment. Once again, the most serious red flag fire weather warning has been issued by the National Weather Service for parts of L.A. and Ventura County starting before dawn tomorrow and continuing into Wednesday. Still a very serious threat with blowtorch conditions possible if winds pick up and the fire resumes. Right now it appears to have laid down in most areas, as we just heard from the L.A. County Fire Department. Also, the newly elected Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hochman, veteran prosecutor, today calling looters and arsonists despicable and disgraceful, and announced his office will be announcing their first cases and charges against looters and arsonists today. He says that they will seek the maximum punishment for those folks. Big change in tone from the previous DA, who was defeated overwhelmingly recently. Joining us live now is the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former Los Angeles City Council member, also longtime LAPD sergeant, still out there as an LAPD reserve officer, and you've been out there in the fire zones. Dennis ZINE, thank you very much for coming to the line, and give us an update on what you're seeing out there.
Well, Frank, what I've seen is catastrophe. What I've seen is a battlefield which resembles a war. And driving through the area, the secure area, what stands is a fireplace. And total destruction of residential areas. And what's ironic is across the street, I'll find a home that's not been touched by the fire. It's absolutely incredible how that fire consumed hundreds, if not thousands, of homes, and a few were not touched. So I've been on patrol there, on the looting patrol, for the last couple of days, and I'll be doing it again this week. And those people who are apprehended, there's no question our new district attorney is going to be very, very aggressive. It's a total change from what it was under the previous district attorney. And I'm proud to say that this district attorney is going to be aggressive, incredibly aggressive, and law enforcement is getting the tools to do the job to keep it safe. But as far as the area goes, there's basically nothing left. You have homes destroyed, cars destroyed, everything. People lost everything that they owned. It brings so much sorrow to me to see it. And so many people are waiting to get into the area. We can't let them in because it will turn into a chaotic situation. They don't know if their home is standing or not. And hopefully we'll get that resolved shortly. But the National Guards have got a great benefit. They've been taking over the entry points. We have a lot of patrols, command posts, officers, reserve officers working it. And the public needs to understand how tragic this is. And my heart goes out for everyone who's lost everything except the clothes on their back. It's really, really horrifying. And a native of this city, which I've been for my entire life, never seen catastrophe. I've gone through riots and floods and earthquakes, nothing to this magnitude. And I compliment law enforcement, the sheriff's department. They're all working together. But we now have a DA, Hopkins, who's going to do the job that needs to be done.
And no mercy for the arsonists and for the looters out there, right?
No mercy at all. Well, they brought in the alcohol, tobacco, firearms. They brought in the feds. They brought in the state. I mean, this is basically everyone. I know there's a little controversy between the mayor and the fire chief, but the fact of the matter is the firefighters are doing everything they can. Law enforcement working 12-hour shifts. Firefighters basically not getting any break. But the fire's set down for now. But with this wind coming on, there's no anticipation. There's no understanding. We don't. It's something we've never dealt with before. So they need to be prepared. But to see the firefighters come in from other parts of the country, and now we see them from Canada and Mexico, but it's a changing environment totally. But I feel for those people who lost every single thing that they owned, and seeing the cars that are burned. It's the most tragic situation I've seen in my lifetime in the City of the Angels, and it's really, really sad. But like they say, we'll recover. But the loss is just absolutely tremendous, and it's frightening to think that the fire could cause that much damage. I know I was evacuated. My neighborhood was evacuated. So many neighborhoods were evacuated. When it was going to come over Mulholland Drive, that's when they said, well, people in the valley now have to prepare to evacuate. So hopefully we're coming to the end of it after this next firestorm. The winds, hopefully that'll subside and we can get back to some normalcy and clean up the area and let people get on with their lives. But it's going to take a long time until they can get on with their lives.
Well, this is heartbreaking. And at this point, finally, looks like a lot of resources have been mobilized. What's the mood there among the first responders? Does everybody feel like they have enough now to face what's ahead tonight and tomorrow?
I believe they have enough resources now. They can jump on it quick. You know, if we don't have people with drones, with the drones smashing into a super scooper and people do what they're supposed to do, and if the people who think they're going to be looting in the area, there's not a lot to loot. There's some still standing, but we've got some very aggressive patrols. And the mandate is you see, you stop, you question, and if there's any indication, you take them into custody and check it out. So there's enough officers out there between the LAPD and the sheriffs and the roadblocks to maintain order. It took time to awfully get that in place, but I think we're on solid ground. And if this wind can pass, we get back to some normalcy. But the cleanup's going to take not months, but years to clean that area, which is devastating, not only in Pacific Palisades, but the other areas that have been touched by these infernos.
So it looks like the fire is laid down in some areas, containment not yet achieved in the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire. I've covered a lot of fires here as well. I remember speaking to one of the fire folks out in the field when we have a situation like this. The fire lays down, and then when the breezes pick up at night, you can see the embers. They call that cat eyes when the side of the hill lights up. With the embers kind of below the surface there. They call that cat eyes. Very, very frightening. So the potential for another firestorm is there. So we wish you and the entire department all the best, Dennis ZINE, and all the first responders out there. God bless them all. And thank you very much for that important update. And we'll keep the open line to you and appreciate it very, very much.
Absolutely, Frank. Let's just pray for those victims that are suffering this tragic situation. Terrible. Pray for them.
Yes,
thank
indeed.
you.
The Honorable Dennis ZINE, former LA City Council member, former LAPD Sergeant, current LAPD Reserve officer with something like 56 years of service to the City of Angels, live with us here on Mottek On Money, 790 KABC.
Hey there, I'm Paula Pan, host of the Afford Anything podcast. I help people make the smartest money decisions possible.
How should that money get invested? Why value? Why not growth? We're going to answer all of these questions.
All of them?
All of them!
From investing strategies
And the thing about tariffs.
to economic trends and beyond.
In one episode.
In one episode. Can you believe it?
I gotta ask for a raise.
What's 5% of zero?
Oh, crap.
Afford Anything. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.